And it's time now for the Preacher's Corner. Opinions expressed are those of the show hosts, not WSTU or Little Dog Media Group. Any reproduction or reuse of this program without written consent of WSTU is strictly prohibited. And your hosts for tonight and every night, Pastor Dino and Traven.
Thank you so much, Ray. Good to see you. You've had a good week?
I have. Thank you. Have you had a good week?
Yeah, I've had a wonderful week. It's been busy. As the older I get, the slower I go, though, Ray. That's the problem here.
I'm following in your footsteps.
Traven, I am looking forward to this week tonight, the program. And you've told me about these people a lot. I've just met them tonight. And the area of addictions, I know as being a pastor, we hear a lot about this in so many areas. And so the theme tonight is on addictions. And if you want to call in today, we'll give you the number later on. Maybe you have some questions you want to ask us about the whole thing of addictions. But introduce our guest tonight, Trey.
Yeah,
We're delighted to have them
It's
on.
my distinct honor to do so. I have John and Erica Garwood, who I met actually back in probably 2017, 2018. And John and I were fortunate to sing in the choir together. He was much better than I was, a great tenor.
You're pretty good, though,
I'm
Trey.
working on it, but he's pretty good. So, but it's just great to see them again, and just fortunate to have them come in. And as Pastor indicated, we're going to talk about addictions. And I think every family has someone that they know that deals with this. I don't think I've ever met anyone that has not. I know in my own family, I've had people that have drug addictions, have alcohol addictions, probably have some other addictions they haven't told me about yet, but it's not uncommon, I don't think. So, and I know, John, too, that you and Erica started a foundation several years ago as a result of some family issues, some family members. And I do want you to talk about that a little bit. But I guess to kind of open up the program is just maybe turn the floor over to you and have you maybe talk about, some of your experiences with people and or family members with addictions. So the floor is yours, John, and then we can go to Erica at any time.
Okay, well, I'll be wrapped up in about 35 minutes then.
That's the time we got.
The issue of addiction is very close to our hearts. We lost our 24-year-old son, Mark, 10 years ago in 2000. Well, actually, it's 11 years ago now, in 2014, to a combination of issues. He was a type 1 diabetic, but he had also become addicted to prescription drugs. So we weren't really prepared to address this battle that we were going to face. Mark was assaulted. Our son Mark, 24, that passed, was assaulted at a pickup basketball game in an LA Fitness in Orlando while he was attending college there at University of Central Florida. He went into the hospital for 3 days. They had broken his jaw, his eye socket. And they had to have oral surgery. And, 10 years ago, 10 or 11 years ago, it was not uncommon for the oral surgeon to prescribe pain medication, and he's prescribed OxyContin to Mark. Mark was a typical young man. He had experimented a little bit with marijuana in high school, and we were aware of that, but we watched it very closely and monitored it as best you can. But we weren't ready for this battle with prescription drugs. He was off to a 5-year run at that point, and it took everything down. I mean, the family was absolutely devastated by his decisions and his actions, but he legitimately had a disease, and he was in the throes of this addiction, and it was a wild ride for about the first 3 years. Erica and I practiced tough love along the way. We came to a point where we said, no more. We were looking for the magic bullet. We were looking for a way out. We were looking for a fast and easy and final solution to this. But, along that first 3-year track, we came to realize we were not in control of this situation. And I think that's the most difficult thing for any family member when they're dealing with family members or close friends or wives, husbands, significant others who are suffering from this disease. And it is a disease.
I just want to say, we thought that we were battling our son. Like, why can't you do this? Don't you understand what you're doing to the family? All those things. But we were battling a disease, not our son.
After about 3 years, Mark had pretty much gotten to a point where he had bottomed out. He had alienated all of his friends, family. Everybody basically said, no more, Mark. You've burned every bridge out there. And he came to us and he said, I can't do this anymore. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I will do anything I can to try to put my life back together. And we cautiously allowed him back in a little bit. And he went to detox. He went to rehab. He went to rehab a couple of times, as a matter of fact, because what we found is the battle against addiction is if you're intending and dedicated to getting out of it, it's not a straight line.
Mm-mm.
It is a journey and not a destination. And so there were ups and downs, there were reversals and positives and negatives along the way. But generally, the trend was positive. And the arc of his life was beginning to come back to what we would consider, normal and stable. But we found out, and we know, based on the last 10 years of our experience, which we'll talk a little bit about here in a moment, we found out very, very quickly that this is a cunning and baffling disease.
Mm-hmm.
And despite his best intentions, there were reversals. And he was beginning to stabilize. He got his dream job down in West Palm Beach. He was working. He was doing all the things he needed to do. He had joined a 12-step program. He was committed to that program.
He was also part of a recovery community, which really benefited him to be able to have that camaraderie and to know that he could have fun in sobriety.
Yeah, and then in about 6 or 8 months before he died, he and one of his buddies at the recovery house that he was living decided, hey, we got this. He's 24 years old, so he's the smartest guy in the room, right?
Sure.
10 feet tall and bulletproof. And the two of them decided that they were going to check out of their sober living facility and they were going to get an apartment. They were both working. They had jobs. The world started closing in again. My counsel to him at that point was, it might be a little bit too early. You need to take some time. And they went out on their own, and without getting into the gory details, it was the weekend of May 24th, 2014. And we got that phone call that no parent should ever get. And we lost him. And that was the beginning of our journey to figure out what our lives were going to be about, because addiction is a family disease. It rips the foundation from beneath everybody's feet. Siblings, parents, grandparents. It's a terrible thing to try to endure. And the most difficult thing is to understand that you can't control it.
Yeah.
There's no way out of it.
Wow.
Yeah, I started going to Al-Anon, which is a support group for families whose loved one suffers from the diseases of either alcoholism or addiction. And, as John said, I learned that I couldn't control it. I couldn't cure it. And so, and I didn't cause it, which as a parent, I felt guilty for a really long time, thinking shoulda, woulda, coulda, why didn't I? And so it was helpful to be a part of a support group.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes I think we blame ourselves as parents. Like if things don't work out the way we think they should, but we typically will blame ourselves. Like, I should have done this. I could have done that. Maybe I should try this. but it doesn't always work. And I had a nephew. It's interesting how individuals are so different. I have a nephew who went through his own challenges, and his drug of choice really started in high school was heroin, which is bizarre in Ohio. And mom and dad put him through, I think, 2 different programs, sobriety programs. He went through them, and it came out better, falls right back into it. And to his credit, today he's sober.
Amen.
Yeah, he's sober. And my brother asked him, he said, and his name's Jared, he said, Jared, how did you change? How did you pull yourself out of this? And he said, it's interesting. I went through 2 different sobriety programs, actually in Michigan, I believe. And he said, they didn't really work. He said, I just made a decision one day. It's like, I'm done with this. I'm done living this life. And to his credit, he pulled himself out of it. And that I think that he's probably unique.
I was just about
think.
to say that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's remarkable that he can do it, because there just seems to be so much support needed
Mhm.
around somebody who is struggling, trying to take it one step at a time, one day at a time, one moment at a time, not to use their drug of choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me ask you both this. What is it that sustains both of you right now? I want to say, first of all, thank you for sharing that story. That's a powerful story. It cannot be easy to share, and I want to thank you both for that. But what is it that sustains you? Is there something that maybe would help all of us to learn? And either one of you that want to answer that.
Well, that's a good question. And to be perfectly honest, after he passed, it was all I could do to get out of bed. I couldn't sleep. And then if I was able to get a few hours of sleep, I'd wake up, and that's when the nightmare began.
Mhm.
But I was angry at God. And I just didn't know what to do. But one day, God put it in my head to say yes to everything. So no matter what was presented to me, I said yes to. Try a support group for parents who've lost children. I said yes. Try cranial sacral therapy. I said yes. I didn't like it, but I said yes to it. And as we mentioned earlier, Mark was part of a recovery community where there was probably maybe 60 or 70 kids in different sober homes. And Mark was the first person they had lost.
Mhm.
And so they dedicated one of their sober homes to him. It's Phoenix House, and it exists today. Excuse me. So I went down there to talk to the men and women down there and tell them Mark's story and our story. And the woman who was running, the manager of Phoenix House, was a 29-year-old woman. She had 4 or 5 months sober. She was grateful to have a job as a waitress in a diner. But she said, is this all there is for me? So after I told my story, I was on my way home, and she called me and she said, your story really resonates with me. My mom is still using. Can we be family?
Mhm.
And I said, of course we can, sweetheart. And she and I developed a really close relationship, and talking to her one day, and she was saying, is this all there is to my life? I came home and talked to John, and it was like, God just put it in our head. What would happen if we offered her a scholarship to go to school? So we asked her, if you could be anything in the whole world, what would you like to be? She said, well, I'd love to be a nurse. So John and I offered her our first scholarship. The day that we were giving her our scholarship, we had a recovery barbecue picnic down in Lake Worth. There was probably 200 kids there. And we were about to make the announcement that she was getting her scholarship when her dad came up to me and he said, do you know what you're doing? Do you know what she's done to this family? Are you sure this is what you want to do? And we said, yes, this is what we want to do. So we awarded her our scholarship, and I'm just so thrilled to say she's working in a local hospital. She's been clean and sober
Fantastic.
probably over 11 years now. So she got her dream job. But seeing how the impact that she is, that it changed her life, and the people in the recovery community wanted to know more about scholarships, we decided to start a foundation. So we have the Mark Garwood Foundation, and we give educational scholarships to men and women in recovery who are looking to begin or continue their education. And in answer to your question, Pastor Dino, that's what motivates us. That helps us seeing the difference in their lives. We have been blessed to give out 76 educational scholarships so
Wow.
far, over almost close to $600,000.
That's a fantastic story. Thank you. If you want to call the Garwoods today, 220-WSTU, 220-WSTU, or 220-9788. I got it right that time, right, Ray? Sometimes I've got out the wrong number.
Yeah, if you're listening, we open the applications for scholarships will be open on July 15th for 2 months. Go to our website and get the information. We award scholarships in November for next January.
And what is the website?
It's markgarwoodfoundation.org. And you can follow us on social media, Facebook and Instagram and stuff, where we will make announcements of that coming up.
So did either of you come to this point where you said, when you went through this and had this kind of a situation happen, God, what's in this for us? I mean, did you go through that? I think of people right now. I think of Dr. Lee Robertson, who was a very wonderful man of God in Tennessee, lost his daughter in a similar situation. They have a huge camp today called Camp Joy, which is named after her. What did you all go through with that?
Well, for me, it was, excuse me, my faith was shaken to its core when I lost Mark. You talk about how you go through this as a man and as a father. I defined myself by having the ability to protect my family and provide for my family. I was the hunter-gatherer. And for me, coming out of Mark's death, there was an intense sense of failure and anger toward God. I had what I thought was a fairly strong faith. Coming into Mark, I really relied on that to help guide me through counseling for him and trying to support him. But when he died, that all went away. And my initial reaction was, God, why did you do this? And it took me some time and the counsel from other pastors for me to begin to understand that God didn't do this. Mark made some choices, and we all have choices. So what I've had to come to grips with is that I have to understand that none of this is God's doing, and none of this was my fault. But as Erica said, I now stand back and say, through our scholarship program, through our foundation, put these young men and women in our lives now and let us provide them with the resources for them to regain their self-esteem and their sense of self-worth and a positive trajectory out of the darkness back to a positive existence and a sober existence and build a career. The 76 individuals that we've awarded our scholarships to over the last 10 years, we're now seeing parents, homeowners, entrepreneurs, people who are starting business.
Generational changes is what we're seeing.
Generational change.
Wow.
Fantastic.
And that is, that's what it has meant to me, because now I understand that whatever my purpose in life was that I thought I had control of, that ain't the way the game plays. And, there's a bigger guy in the equation here. And
We
I
often
have to
tell
trust
God
that.
what to do, don't we?
Yeah, it's
And he
like,
laughs at us.
yeah. I plan, he laughs.
Yeah.
I do want to say, too, that I want to really thank Stewart Congregational Church, because you all have supported us from the beginning to help us grow and sustain our foundation. So just thank you so much.
It's our privilege. Our privilege. 501c3 LLC, is that what it is?
Yes, it is.
Mhm.
It's a public 501c3.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Erica, you were talking as you were kind of laying the basics of the foundation in the story, I was just thinking a couple of things. I'm thinking, boy, the compassion that you showed this individual and the hope that you gave her. I mean, and I think sometimes we forget that. Just for someone to believe in them, and you may not have really known this person initially, but to reach out to this person, and maybe she did not get that from the people that she was surrounded by prior to that. But for you as an individual, just to show her that love and that compassion and that hope, I think that was invaluable, because we did a session on hope, and I think we discount that. I mean, people having a belief in somebody and giving them that's awesome, I think. You know?
Yeah, it's amazing to observe the change. The stories are almost all the same. You can write the script over and over again, and it never varies that much. But these people, these individuals who are taking advantage of our scholarship opportunities and taking the initiative to do that, they come before us and apply for the scholarship. They've got brushes with the law. They're marginally employable, just like our first recipient was.
They've taken out loans. They've defaulted on loans. They've had felonies, and we're like, so what?
Yeah. And they come to us and they're like, some of them will admit when we go through the review process and approval process for the scholarship, they're saying, I've been thinking of doing this for 2 years, but because society has stigmatized me so badly now, I don't have the confidence to step out anymore. So like our first scholarship recipient and everyone since then, there's that sense that I'm not worthy. I am not worthy. And that fear of disappointment again. And what we find is in our communities right now, focus is on treatment, rehab, detox, counseling, education, intervention through law enforcement. Those are very important elements of the battle against addiction and drugs in our community. But where we have come to find ourselves is that's all good, but you get to a point, what now? And we are the now what factor in these individuals' lives, because they get our scholarship and they're like, their eyes light up and they say, no one. We give them a $5,000 scholarship. And they stand there and they go, nobody in the last X number of years has demonstrated any sense of compassion, true compassion, or confidence in my ability to get my life back. I'm done with it was, but my history haunts me now. And you guys are stepping up and giving us the opportunity to move forward without the financial difficulties, because most of these people, as I say, are marginally employable. They're minimum wage. They can pay their rent, get a little bit of gas, maybe buy a pack of cigarettes if that's their choice. But other than that, for them to have the means to go back to school, to get an education and move forward, not possible. And we give them that opportunity. And the message they carry, because what we say to them is, pay it forward. Pay it forward. Tell people about what we're doing. Tell people about why we're doing it. And let us continue this mission and this work in this community.
This mission is consuming you now, isn't it? It's something I can see it in you. If we asked you 2 or 3 more questions, we would be here all night, which is, I love to see that in people, though, what they've gone through and God has spoken to them. And it thrills me to hear this. And I want to ask, I don't care who answers this again, but I want to ask you this, with this kind of a situation and somebody is going through this right now and they're kind of embarrassed about it, what's the best way to advise them? I there's a parent that said, I don't know if I want to talk about this with people. My child is kind of out of control. Maybe we've talked to our pastor, but they're not really getting the real help. What would you advise to somebody like that?
Well, we're available to talk to the parents. If you can get them into treatment, that's one of the best things to do to break that cycle. But it's a process, and I would, strongly urge the parents to get support for
So
themselves.
how do they
too.
get a hold of you two?
They can do it through our website. They
Okay.
can do through, and they can send a request there. But it's important that the parents get support for themselves.
Yeah, it's it is a very difficult subject. I've had the opportunity over the years, and it comes up quite frequently, probably once or twice a quarter, maybe. I'll get a phone call from a business acquaintance or a friend here in the community saying, look, I've got a friend they know about who we are and what we do. And I have a friend who's struggling with their son or their daughter, and they don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. Where are the resources? What can they expect from this process, and how do they even start? And so I'll get that phone call, and obviously the first thing I hear is, I've told him to do this, I've asked her to do that, I've suggested she do that, and the first thing out of my mouth is, don't. You cannot control this. When that individual is ready, then that is the time that it will start. But the opportunity to seek out resources in the community, where it be Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, find a meeting, Al-Anon meetings. Here in Martin County, you can go to the website for Alcoholics Anonymous, and you can find information about, and that's as good a starting place as anywhere,
Exactly.
to talk to somebody on an individual basis. And, I know in the AA rooms, they'll tell you what you see here and here stays here. So anonymity is part of that process. And, it's a great opportunity to just crack the door and hear somebody make an objective analysis of where you are, what's going on, and what the next step will be.
Mhm.
The worst thing, the toughest thing is there's no magic bullet here. There is none.
Wish there was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other thing is I think of my own kids, and you can tell them something, and they kind of listen to you, but they kind of don't. But you sometimes struggle with like, why don't they do this type thing? And then my brother may tell my daughter the same thing, and she'll call me and she says, boy, Uncle Logan's so brilliant. He told me to do this. And I'll look at Sandy and I go, didn't I tell her to do that? So I think hearing that other voice is important.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think hearing it from somebody else is important because they get tired of hearing it from mom and dad, right? So hearing it from somebody else you mentioned someone who's objective, I think is critical to tell them.
That's good parental
Yeah.
advice, Draven. That's excellent.
Yeah,
it
so
really is.
I see that all the time,
So did you get mad at pharma and medical doctors because of this? Was there a part of your life that struggled with that?
No, not directly.
Mhm.
What's interesting is I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of doctors about this situation, and an oral surgeon that I was talking to, he said, "You know what? I am guilty."
Mm.
So they're becoming more aware of it now. He said the process was I would initially prescribe OxyContin, for example, and then that individual would go back, and when they came back to refill it, they'd go to the front desk, go, "Doctor, this guy's here." And he said, only by chance did I understand this guy's using 4 months of OxyContin in 30 days.
Mm. Mm. Wow.
Yeah, and that's been an epidemic really in Ohio and probably in the Midwest. And they finally, the medical community's finally gotten a hold of it. Like you
They're
said, yeah.
much more aware of
Much
it these
more.
days.
And
Exactly.
I think we're going to get ready to take a break here.
Draven,
right?
it's hard to believe it's break time already.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
this
you really
is-
appreciate the Garwood. This is excellent.
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, Eric
Wow.
always says, if you ask me what the time is, you can sit down for 30 minutes and have a cup of coffee.
I like that.
yeah,
I
that's
like
great.
that. Well, Ray, this is an exciting, interesting part of the program, isn't it, right here?
Yeah, it absolutely is. Yeah. We'll be back in 1 minute with more of The Preacher's Kid and the Pastor on 1450 WSTU.
Mhm. This goes right to the heart.
There are moments along the way, where financially it goes through.
And now we return you to the preacher's kid and the pastor with Pastor Dino and Trayvon.
I think I'm going to take it here, Ray, real quick. I want to reach out to our sponsors again. Without their support, we could not do this program. We want to thank them, over and over again. I just want to reach out to Paul Piatti, Home Improvements. Paul's been doing home improvements for over 40 years. Yeah, John, he's still working. Can you believe it? So he's great, but he can be reached at 772-546-3403. Again, 772-546-3403. Also, Larry Grubb, Two Anchors Plumbing. He and his partner been in this business for a long time. If you're looking for a plumber who knows what they're doing, call Larry at 772-201-3516 or Tom again at 772-210-2084. They're terrific. I've used them. I've used Paul Piatti also, so they're fantastic. If you're looking for a really good CPA, he's finally getting his head up now. John McDonald, he's my accountant, but he does a great job. John can be reached at 772-221-8882. Again, 772-221-8882. Make sure you tell him I told him to call. And then also Peggy Wood, again, an attorney I've worked with quite a bit here. And Peggy's with McCarthy Summers, and she can be reached at 772-286-1700. Again, 772-286-1700. And that is Peggy Wood. And last but not least, I want to reach out to Debbie Hollister with Hollister Insurance. Debbie's fantastic. She's been doing it a long time. And her son and daughter-in-law work with her also, but they can be reached at 772-288-2380. 772-288-2389. Also, I want to just give a plug for the church. Again, Stewart Congregational. We have Sunday morning service at 10 a.m. and we are at 3110 Astor Lane, Southeast Astor Lane, actually, right off on the corner of
To be
Runtke.
technical.
Yeah, to be technical. Here in Stewart on the corner of Runtke by the splash pool and Astor Lane. So come and visit us. We'd love to have you. And I'll just give a little plug for the choir. So if you haven't heard us sing, you need to come. So,
Amen.
but Pastor, I'll turn it back and maybe you can kick us off.
You sang your first solo in church not too long ago, and that was a blessing. You had a guitar up there, and I was so impressed.
I did. I was going to tell John when he was talking about, a lot of times people, when they do have a challenge like this, they're embarrassed and they don't really know how to proceed. And it made me think about one of the country music songs that I sing. I do other stuff too, so not just country, but I'm a big Merle Haggard fan, and he did one of his top selling songs was A Branded Man. And it's a great song, and it really tells the story because once you have that brand on you, or what he calls the black mark, difficult to get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I was thinking of that as you were talking. So, so it's kind of interesting. So we got to help these people.
Yeah.
Get to a better place.
We have the Garwoods on, and we're so glad you're on. Thank you for being with us today. And we're talking about addictions. What do you tell somebody who is with these addictions that they're getting because of the prescriptions? What do you tell them initially? And I don't care again who answers this. You guys know what you're talking about here. So, what do you tell them? If I had a child, for example, if I had we have an extended family, and this stuff is it's in all families nowadays. Something about this. What do you tell them to initially? I guess you don't put a big load on them right away, or do you? I don't know.
No, you really can't. You can't force the solution here.
Mm-hmm.
Self-awareness is very critical to the whole process. And unfortunately, as I suggested earlier, this is a family disease, and the individual that is the subject of the addictive behavior is going to disrupt the family. I mean, there's no doubt about it. lying, cheating, stealing. I mean, it's all a very common thread. So usually, you have to treat it as a family disease. I am not a counselor. I'm not qualified to be a counselor, but I have a lot of life experience, and the 10 years of dealing with the individuals who come through our scholarship program, these 76 individuals has taught me a great deal. And what the common theme has to be is, for me, two things. There is a way out. There is a way out. It is not hopeless, but there is a very definitive faith element that comes into play here. Because individuals who are torn by addiction generally are in the mindset that they are beating themselves up, and they're thinking, I'm doing this to myself, and they hate themselves. The self-loathing is tremendous. So the opportunity for me to talk to a 24-year-old or for me to talk to a 17-year-old doesn't do a lot. But for me to take the opportunity and to take the initiative, if I have that opportunity, to find a peer group or someone that can have the opportunity to say, look, I've been where you've been. The journey is the same. It doesn't vary. The mindset and the thought process doesn't alter at any step. And when you find individuals who are in the same position of suffering from the disease of addiction, and it is a disease, it's not a condition, it is a disease, and have them talk about, this is what I did. What we also say is, I can't tell you, nor could anybody who is working through this process, I can't tell you how to do it. I can tell you how I did it, and that's what we hear from all of our recipients. And this worked for me. So take that seed or take that little bit of advice, and if you're really intent and willing to take that next step and commit, as I said earlier, it is a journey. It is not a destination, and it is fraught with reversals. And you've got to be in a position when you go to these support groups, whether it's NA, AA, Al-Anon, Alateen, whatever the group may happen to be, or other professional counselors, they need to understand that you have to be there and have the channels of communication open. You've got to have empathy. You must be compassionate, and you must be forgiving, because it will challenge you every step of the way. We battle this for 5 years with Mark.
And what happens is, going through that, is my behaviors changed by trying to think that I could cure or control or manage Mark's disease, telling him what to do. I mean, yelled, screamed, pleaded, begged. I mean, I just did everything that I'm not proud of myself, but I didn't know any better. I did the best I could with the information I had at the time, which is why it's so important that parents also get some help, be part of some sort of support group to help understand what you can and cannot do.
I suppose that with anything that we deal with people, they have to make their decision at some point. They have to
They
decide.
to want it.
They have to want it. Yeah.
Exactly.
You mentioned at the break, Erica, about the Lord sustaining you through this. Say a few words about that, if you would.
Well, it took a while, to be perfectly honest, as happened with John also, but with me, I was a fairly new Christian. And I thought, I went to church, I tithed, I did everything right, and I couldn't understand why God allowed this to happen. I mean, I was so angry, and people told me I needed to write, to journal, and I am not a journal or a writer, but I wrote nasty, awful letters to God every day for months, because I just had to get it out until I could no longer write anymore, until I was done. And I had counseled by my pastor to make sure that what I was doing was okay. And he told me God's shoulders were broad enough that he could take it. And so that's what I did. And then that, alongside of working in with our foundation, really has helped me. And so once I came to the place that John spoke of, that, Mark made choices. God allowed it, but Mark got to go home. You know, how awesome is that? He got to go home. And it was probably maybe 2 or 3 years ago that I took that book of nasty letters, sat at the beach. I asked God for his forgiveness. I tore them out of the book and I burned them and
Wow.
prayed that he would forgive me.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That, that's quite a testimony. God bless you. That's great. So when you're looking at these type of situations, and I believe that thoroughly. Job, I know in the Bible, many times told God, "What's up?" You know, and it wasn't until he prayed for his friends that God really turned things for him. In Job 42, I believe it was. And it seems like so many times we really do have a plan to tell God. We have an idea to tell God, and when he's not doing our plan, we're concerned about it. And I think your testimony really gives emphasis on that today, because I think that's a theological truth that we all have had to learn to live with. God has a wonderful plan for everybody's life. That's what we always say. But when you go through something like this, it doesn't seem so wonderful. Yeah.
I believe God's plan is for us to draw closer to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
But people in the beginning would say, well, remember Job. And I'd say, well, yeah, if God would talk to me, it would certainly be a lot easier to believe that. But
Yeah.
I now can hear him speaking to me.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us a little bit more about what's happening with your foundation, how that's a blessing, how you raise the funds for the foundation. Talk a little bit about this idea of who comes to this. I guess you have some meetings in a year where they come and make commitments and so forth, John.
Well, it's we have fundraising events during the course of the year. We actually have 2 physical fundraising events. In November, we host a sporting clays shooting competition out at
Oh.
the South Florida Shooting Club. Last year we had about 185 shooters last year. So
And the
it's a-
sheriff's team comes out, and
Yeah.
the sheriff's grill team comes out and cooks for us, and the sheriff comes out, and
yeah,
Congrerman Mast has been a part of it.
yeah.
Does my good friend Bob the Barber come out?
No, Bob the Barber does not come
Okay.
out. Yeah.
I'll have to
But
tell
I
him.
get my hair cut at Bob's
Okay.
as well. So
You know.
I've been trying to get Bob to come for years.
We also have a tennis and pickleball tournament at the
Oh.
end of January. But we do a lot with our recipients come out to all these events and help serve and support, so people can see exactly where their money is going. And we'll have a back to school dinner for all our recipients in August.
So if somebody wasn't able to make any of the events, can they just go online and make a contribution?
Oh,
Directly
yeah.
to-
Absolutely.
Can you give that again, John, real quick? The
Yeah,
foundation.
it's our foundation website is markgarwoodfoundation.org. And you can find all the information about our scholarship program,
Good.
everything that we've done, and what our mission is. And right there on the homepage, there's a nice, convenient donate button. So,
Oh, perfect. Good. Make it easy, right?
yeah, make it very. We
And
try
it,
to
and
make
it does work, right?
Absolutely, I can promise you it works. We do work. But,
I like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know that feeling.
Yeah. IT.
Yes.
Yeah, well, we're talking today with the Garwoods, and we're talking about addictions. And what scripture has been? And we have just a minute left here, Ray, something like that. Just we'll start this and finish up in the last segment. What scripture has sustained you folks?
For me, it's one word. With God, all things are possible. That's it.
That's a
One
couple
verse.
more than one word.
Well, I'm sorry. There's one verse. I meant
Phrase,
to say,
right,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that I think that's the stained glass in Stewart Congregational Church that we've
Mhm.
supported with that.
Oh, wow, that's
That was a
great.
good one.
That's
It was
great.
it was before we lost Mark, but those words became prophetic for
Mhm.
us
Mhm.
because it allowed us, as Erica so eloquently says when she's talking about our foundation, that God took our pain and turned it into a passion.
Well, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. Well, you're listening in to the Garwoods today on addiction. If you want to call, we have a few minutes left. 220-9788. 220-WSTU. Call us, and if you have any questions or comments you want to make to our good friends, the Garwoods, let us know.
And we'll be back with the preacher's kid and the pastor in just a moment. And we return you now to the preacher's kid and the pastor with Pastor Dino and Trayvon. Gentlemen.
Yeah, I wanted to finish up with our sponsors. Just want to give a shout out to Terry Wicks at Pools by Greg. Terry's been building custom pools for over 40 years. So if you need a pool built or a pool resurfaced or any kind of maintenance, give them a shout. Terry's terrific. He's at 772-370-5025. Again, 772-305025. Also, if you're looking for a landscaper, you can reach out to Sunny Coast Landscape, Sandra Barnett. I call her the general manager there. So reach out to Sandra. She's at 772-215-0940. Again, 772-215-0940. They've also been doing this for 40 years. So these are real pros. And Dino, also want to thank you as one of our sponsors. It's fantastic. And thank you to yours truly, because I'm also a sponsor. So if you need any financial planning, you can reach out to us at 772-223-4000. So keep us in mind when you do that. I did have a question for John and Erica. You had mentioned in the start of the program as kind of what the impetus for your son was, sound like almost like a medical situation really kind of helped create this situation for him to get on some of the Oxycontin medications. And I think that there's a number of people that kind of start down that addiction road, and some of it may be a result of like anxiety, lack of self-esteem, those types of things. What have you guys seen in working with some of your recipients, the students, as you talk to them in their journey, kind of what started that? Does anything stick out to you that was like, these are 2 or 3 key things that really got people on kind of the wrong path? And also my family, I look back at some of my uncles, and I look at they had a problem with alcohol, but it has continued. So that's another thing I've seen. So what have you guys seen in your experience?
I think a couple of things. First, I think trauma, having some trauma in your life has exacerbated the addiction. And it's not only is it a family disease when somebody has it, but it can be passed on if there's a genetics as a factor.
Yeah, I think what happens, as Erica suggests, is the stories that we hear over and over again. The situation in the home, for some odd reason, everyone that comes to us who are traveling this road come to us and they say, "I just never felt like I belonged."
Mm-hmm.
And so what that develops through the early developmental years, the teen years, and into young adulthood, if you have that sense of loss of self-worth or lack of self-esteem, that's going to contribute to it. But it is a disease, and there is a genetic propensity to go down the road of addiction. The substance of choice, what you have to understand, is not necessarily the centerpiece of addiction. That is the Band-Aid. It's the thought process and how people see themselves and how people are affected by in their lives with their relationships that drive them to this point, and that becomes either the alcohol or the drug outside of a medical situation like we encountered. But outside of that, all of a sudden if they're exposed to it, it's like, I feel worthy now.
I finally feel like I fit in.
I fit in.
Right.
Yeah. And it's a false sense of security.
Yeah, it's almost like a coping mechanism.
It is a
Exactly.
coping
It is a
mechanism.
coping
Yeah, it's
mechanism.
like they once they can get that drink, we'll say, then they kind of settle down to their. I know people with anxiety, so it seems like it takes they're saying takes the edge off. You've heard that so many times.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it is progressive, and
Yeah.
so it goes beyond taking the edge off until the point where it becomes destructive.
Yes. Yeah.
And when it becomes destructive, that's where you get anger. That's where all these other social issues come into play, and then that's just a death spiral.
Alcoholism ends ISM, and they say that stands for I, self, and me, because that's all you can think about when you're in the throes of addiction. I, self, and me.
You guys have mentioned a number of organizations that you've encountered through your son and or other people you work with. Are there 3 or 4 here in kind of our local community in Martin County, Port St. Lucie, that you would, maybe recommend to people to reach out if they are struggling, in addition to your foundation? But is there anybody else that you think of that you're like, boy, these are people that have been very helpful to some of our folks?
There's several treatment centers. The first one I'd highly recommend is the Hanley Foundation, Hanley Treatment Center, which is in West Palm Beach.
Mm.
There's also Banyan, which is they have locations south and north and here all over. Excuse me, Ambrosia. There's several different treatment centers.
Well, you have a good memory. You remember all those names. I don't know if I could have done that. It's interesting.
What about identity in Christ? You're Christians, you know Christ. And I wrote a book a few years ago, and I really believe Ephesians 1:1-14, which talks about our identity, who we really are in Christ. And God sees us as if we had never sinned in the righteousness of Christ. It's an amazing truth.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, amen.
Mhm.
Is that truth? Does that kind of truth help people that are in addictions? Or is it too hard to focus on that type of thing?
I think once they start getting into recovery, having a spiritual connection with God is what it's all about. It's all
Mhm.
about having a spiritual awakening and understanding that I'm not large and in charge. He is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I
So
like
true.
that.
So
Mhm.
true.
Yeah, well, the book of Ephesians, I think it was 9 or 10 things that are listed there, what Christ has done for us. And it's all him. Everything is him. It's not us at all. And I think once we understand that and can depend on that, I'm not sure what an addict thinks about when he thinks, but if he can clear his head to get into that, I think it's a life-changing truth to have that kind of scripture changing our life. It's changed my life. Years ago as a pastor, I think it was 1993 or somewhere like that, I was going to preach through the book of Ephesians, and I had 6-month plan, and I ended up in the first 14 verses for 6 months because it began to teach me who we really are in Christ. And that's why I did the book. I think you got a copy of the
Mhm.
book, True Spiritual Identity, How Does God See Us? And somehow if we can capture that, and sometimes life eats us up and we don't capture that. But if we can get into that and think about that, I think it's a great help to all of us.
Agreed.
I wanted to, I know we're running short on time, but I wanted to make sure that I thank John and Erica again for coming in and sharing, opening your hearts to
Thank
us.
you for letting us.
We appreciate it. And I'm reminded about, like, as you were talking about, there are a lot of things you can do. There are a lot of tools out there for us, but I always tell people one of the things that I think that people maybe discount is to come to the Lord. And if you want true peace, this is from my belief, in my opinion, you won't find true peace until you come to the cross. That's just from my view. So I'd encourage you, if you've tried everything else, try the cross. You got nothing to lose.
Absolutely.
You're sounding like a preacher now, not a
Isn't that the
preacher's kid.
truth?
You know that?
Wow. Maybe I should go to seminary.
I think you have.
So again, thanks guys for coming.
Yeah.
In.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
You
Thank
guys
you
have
for
been a
having us.
blessing. Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you
know
for
a lot of
having
people
us.
have been blessed by that tonight. And thank you, Ray. You're always the best out there. Thank you, my dear friend.
Thanks, Ray.
Well, thank you. You've been listening to The Preacher's Kid and the Pastor, heard every Friday from 5:05 to 6 o'clock on 1450 WSTU Stewart.